Ballers, it's Preacher. What's going on? Today we're going to tackle something that I think many people struggle with. And last week's video, one of you probably heard, or many of you heard, is that Ghosty was like, thank you very much for the input on something I helped him with. And then you guys obviously asked, what the hell did you help him with? And it was how to assess Warcraft logs, something I kind of take for granted, and I think it's worth visiting so you guys can use it the best. Warcraft logs is probably something that near enough every raid does. If you're not doing it, I would suggest you get doing it. It's very, very important if you care at all about improving yourself. But the problem is most people don't know how to use it. So what you end up doing, let's face facts, most of us go, oh, this screen has lots of information that I don't care about. What was my damage done? And then you pick a fight, and usually you pick the one you did well on. So you'd be like, what was the Dragon's Nightmare? Cool. Oh, look, I got 99th percentile. Yay, I'm fucking awesome. And that's it. And then you disappear. Or you come here and your ranking or whatever is not as good, and you just think, fuck, I fucked up. But that's usually where it stops. And then some of you might even make the attempt to start trying to dig down into Warcraft logs, because you can get so much information here to figure out where you went wrong, or more importantly, you compare yourself to someone else. It's very easy to go into the rankings and excuse me, very easy to go on the rankings and click someone who did the best in the world and try and compare where you actually landed, right? So what I did for Ghosty was go through his logs with him. So we're going to go through it today. I don't think he'll mind. He's not actually here. It's midnight. Oh, you can actually see that. Yeah, it's 11:15 at night. And see if we can figure something out. So what we've got here is an Ethendra kill that was by my guild. I wasn't there because I was in London. And an Ethendra kill where Ghosty was there. Okay, Ethendra Mythic. So this is a Mythic Ethendra kill where Ghosty was there. And what we're going to try and do is see what happened so that if you were in the situation... Now, obviously, this alters depending on which class and spec you're playing, but you'll be looking for the same things that I'm going to be looking for with Ghosty. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, obviously, is check damage done. Yay. Damage done with Ghosty, and he achieved a rank 44. So he's now, this is why I was unhappy. This is why he said, can you just check this out for me? Rank 44 and did 87 million damage, okay, or 229k DPS. When we go over to So Good and we click on damage done, the same fight. I want to get rid of these for now because I'm going to bring these back in a minute. We can see So Good got a 94%. Okay, that's pretty good. So that's somebody maybe I compare myself to. Now, one thing we do have to note here before we get into this is So Good does have the legendary, and Ghosty, as you're probably all aware, does not have his yet, despite the fact that he absolutely should have. But there are many of you in the same position, and you know what that's like. So that's a definite thing. Having a legendary item, especially one that's good for your DPS, is certainly something that can have an effect. But we kind of want to know more than that. So what we're going to do is dig into it a little bit. I'm not going to go super into this because I don't want to overwhelm you guys. You can become real crazy on this stuff. And see if we can spot some just obvious differences of things that we can work on, right? That's all we're looking for, is things that maybe you're doing incorrectly. So if we click on So Good on his own, and we're going to do the same with Ghosty, we're going to start doing some side-by-side comparison, okay? So what we can see here, first of all, is all the spells that Ghosty used in order to kill the boss. Now, the observant amongst you will already notice two, probably, hopefully, can you guess what they are before we do it? Two major problems with this, which I don't think, in fact, I know because I spoke to him. He wasn't aware of how big of a deal this is. So if you go over to So Good, you'll notice there's at least two extra things on here that he did that Ghosty didn't. The first one is potioning. So many of you are non-raiders or perhaps in lower raiding guilds might not be aware of exactly how powerful potions are in Legion. They are completely over the top for what they are. They're supposed to be a fun little damage boost, but as you can see here, So Good obviously used 2 potions. It says 1, but 1's a pre-pull, as you can imagine. Used 2 potions, and they did as much damage as all his Demon Blades did, as all his Chaos Blades did, as all his I-Beams did, etc., etc. You can see they are a huge portion of his damage. 5.5% of his total damage came from just pressing potion. Yeah. Really quite fucking dramatic when you think about it. On top of that, what's the second thing you might wonder is the neck enchants. Now, this will vary on class to class. Generally, Mark of the Hidden Satyr is the #1 for everybody, I believe, and you can easily correct me down below. But you can see just over 1% of his total damage, 1.28 million, came from his neck enchant, whereas Ghosty doesn't have that neck enchant. So those are two massive things. It's like 7% damage missing just because of potions and a neck enchant. And there's something you can instantly go, I can fix that in about 5 minutes. Done, donezo. A good start for anybody, right? So obviously there'll be many of you out there who's like, yeah, well, I know about potions and shit, Preach. I'm not a fucking noob. Okay, so we're going to dig a little bit further down. The next thing we're going to do is assess this thing. Fight length. Fight length is so important that I don't think people really understand how important it can be. Some of you will do, but most of you don't give it the credit where it's deserved. It all comes down to when do your cooldowns reset. So Demon Hunter's quite an interesting one because their cooldown is very, very long, their Metamorphosis, okay? So if you can look at some fights, like I know this week, I think we killed this in under 5 minutes, which is why I didn't want to use that log. But they're both about the same. So Ghosties was a 618 kill, and ours here was a 644, a longer kill. Now, some of the more seasoned with this will know that the 644 kill should result in lower DPS. If you don't know why that is, if you have a super powerful cooldown like Metamorphosis, okay, it gives you a huge, huge boost. You can see it here, Annihilation. Yeah, and you can also think this is Annihilation. There it is. That's this other one. This was just a potion, maybe? I don't know. Some good damage there. Fury of the... Oh, I got Fury of the Eldari. Were we all mind controlled? Maybe. I'm just guessing. Big Fury of the Eldari went off there. Look at that. Woohoo! If you have a huge, huge DPS cooldown, it props up the rest of your damage, but it starts to peter down, okay? The extra damage you gain from a powerful cooldown starts to wear down until you get the next one. And then it props it back up again. You can see how the DPS kind of goes down besides these spikes here. And then it goes way back up again when he got his next Metamorphosis. You see that? And that bumps your damage up. So if the fight is really bad for you, really, really bad for you, to the point where, as a mage, like, we did normal just before I filmed this, and we kill the bosses on normal so fast with our team that I only got 1 combustion off, but it was about 5 seconds off getting a second combustion off. That meant my damage was massively wonky compared to how it would have been had the fight taken like 12 or 13 seconds longer. Should the fight have taken 12 or 13 seconds longer, my damage would have skyrocketed again because I would have been blowing the fuck out of the boss. But unfortunately, I didn't get to do that. So fight length is always something you have to compare. If you say, I'm doing really badly, I'll compare myself to a top log, and they're killing the fight at a time that means their DPS cooldowns are more representative of the whole overall damage, then there's going to be a huge skew there that you potentially can't do anything about because it also comes down to how much DPS the rest of your guild is doing in order to achieve that time. Okay, something you've really got to bear in mind there is fight length. And also, if you're doing this on normal and heroic, you also got to bear in mind how many people were there. Were you using like 1 healer? So, you know, things like that, because that means you're probably carrying way more damage than the fight was intended for, way more damage than other people might have done it for. Fight length and setup are very, very key components. That's why I wanted to do this on Mythic, because it's a set 20 people. All right, you with me so far? I hope so. So now we're going to look at a couple of other things. So fight length is relatively the same. They both got 2 Metamorphoses, and we can see that proven here. As you can see, the buff on So Good, Metamorphosis was 2, and if we come over to Ghosty, Metamorphosis 2. Okay, cool. Let's look at some other things. What's the top stats for a Demon Hunter? Generally, critical strike rating. So what we're going to do is take the top ability, Chaos Strike. I believe it's the top for them both. Yes. And we're going to see that So Good had a critical strike chance of 56% on his Chaos Strike. That gives us a reasonable bearing of what his overall crit chance is. And if we look down towards Ghosty, we'll see his crit chance was actually 46.9%. Significantly lower. Significantly lower, considering the critical striking actually refunds Fury and therefore allows him to do significantly more damage because he's not having to use his builder, his resource generator, as opposed to his resource spender, right? You guys understand that that's how that works. So this is actually something really interesting. This is an interesting check of, wow, my crit chance is really, really low comparatively. Really low. And that has a significant impact on my damage. And you'll see here that, in fact, So Good got 64 casts off of his Chaos Strike. If we look over at... this is So Good. So Good actually got 77. You can see how much that played into a part of it. Now, obviously, the fight was slightly longer, but not to the point where you'd expect to see a difference of that many. That's a significant amount more, and that's because of generally of his crit chance, giving him all that extra damage. The next thing we're going to look at is, were we using the same goddamn talents? And the answer here is no. As you can see here on So Good, he's got Demon Blades. Now, again, you'll always be looking at talents. And then we check over to Ghosty, he was using Demon's Bite. That means that different talents were used. That might prompt you, depending on your class and spec, to go and double check if something changed recently. This is often an issue that you'll see, is that a different talent has become dominant. I tried to explain that in the recent Fire Mage video, where developments in your gear often affect which talents you choose because of how they interact together. And these are things that you can start looking at, okay? These are things you can start investigating to see, oh, okay, I see what's going on here. Still bearing with cast times, we can look at other things. So Ghosty did things like I-Beam 6 times and Fury of the Illidari 6 times. And then we can look over here and we can see only 4 and Illidari 5 times. Less times they were used. Does that mean, as we could probably see from things like this, does that mean that So Good saved all his Fury of the Illidaris essentially for breaking people out of mind control? Did Ghosty do that? You will know the answer. You will know the answer because you were there. You don't need to go any further than this. We can figure that out in here, but you will know, oh, I was using it on cooldown, whereas I would have got way more damage out of it if I would have held it back and sat on it and did things like that. Yeah? I would have held it back if I would have done that. Oh, and then you kind of think, stupid. Yeah, of course, because I would have been AoEing a lot of people. I would have got them out of the mind control quicker. Plus, I would have padded my damage out, but also been effective. I mean, padding is a sort of subjective word here because breaking people out of MC is important. And you can kind of see that paid off in overall damage as well. So there's things like that that you have to consider when you're comparing logs. Other things you have to consider, though, right? So there's the basics. I'm sure you guys can look through this now and compare casts and compare chances and stuff and ask yourself questions like, I brought his armory up here because I know he won't mind because I've already been through this with him. He's fine with it. So is the crit chances so much different? You then ask yourself, am I gearing correctly? Obviously a problem that's happened with some people is item level wonk going all over the place. So if your crit is like an overwhelming majority good stat for you, you then check your gear. So we look at his armory and his swaggy transmog and we ask ourselves, have I got crit on every item? So I've got crit there, crit there. Oh, haste mastery there. But could I get a better alternative? Maybe not. But I kind of want to get crit in that slot. And then you work through your gear. Crit, cool. Agility trinket, haste trinket, okay. Crit verse, and then I'm looking here. Crit. Oh, verse mastery. But I do like verse, but do I really want to be looking at like non-crit items? Probably not, right? And then you start thinking like that. Does that all make sense to everybody? I hope so. Cool and the gang. Right then, some other stuff we can ask ourselves. How does the fight work? Also very important. We can compare ourselves like by like here, and we can see things like Annihilation was cast 23 times by Ghosty in the 2 Metamorphosis, but Annihilation was cast 31 times by So Good, but again, crit probably plays a major part in that as well. We ask ourselves how the fight works, and it's Nethendra Heroic, so there are things like rot going on. A very sort of infamous quote amongst raiders, and one that I still abide by today because I still believe it's true, was made by one Mr. Kungan a long time ago in the Burning Crusade. And that was, he always considered the better player to be the guy who casted the most spells. And that actually sounds very obvious and simple, but when you think about it, it actually determines the skill level of a lot of players in a very good way. In order to cast the most spells possible, you have to not die. Right, that sounds pretty obvious, but you also have to be very good at things like positioning. So you're moving the absolute minimum possible and getting sort of like out of range at minimum possible. All these things play into being able to cast more spells than the other. If you can have a significant gear disadvantage, but the fact of the matter is, if you casted 3 or 4 more spells that hit really hard, the chances are you're going to catch up to that guy who said significantly more damage but casted less spells. Gear doesn't really matter unless you're firing the cannon, right? It doesn't matter if you have the best ammo in the world if you're shooting the cannon less, is the kind of idea behind that. I still believe it to be one of the golden rules of any raider is you should be finding ways to literally just cast more spells because you will be doing more damage. Let's look at things like in Nethendra where we get debuffed with something called rots. And this is how you compare those things. So we could say things like, I wonder if I got rot more times, which meant I was out of range of the boss more. So what you can do is click on debuffs and then you can click on rot. So if we go to Ghosty here and we click on debuffs, we can look down all the debuffs that he got here and we can see that he got rot twice. Okay, he got it 2 times. Now then we ask ourselves questions like this. Oh, did he get rot during Metamorphosis? Okay. Let's do the same with So Good. So Good got rot 4 times. What? He got it more times than me and still did all those extra casts? How is that possible? And then you notice that one of them was like at the very end of the fight when the boss died. So technically you got 3. Okay, you can see it's barely even on the meter there. So he got 3. He got 1 more rot than me. Now you can ask yourself questions like, how did he handle rot? So in going back to what Kungan said, let's say you get rot. Some of you will be under the impression, and maybe your raid leader forces this on you, that if you get rot, you need to get the hell out of there ASAS fucking P. Whereas others amongst you will say things like, if I get rot, I need to find a place where I can still DPS and stand here with my rot, not hurting anybody. And then I can do things like if I was a demon hunter, rot's about to explode, I'm going to vengeful retreat out of there, let's say, or I'm going to fell rush out of there, and then I'm going to fell rush back or vengeful retreat back. Something like that that absolutely reduces my downtime to its utter minimum. A significant amount of damage is going to be lost if you just get rot and just run the fuck away, right? You just get out of there as soon as humanly possible, even though you have these great mobility tools ready and raring to go. Of course, in some occasions, you might not be able to find a safe place and you have to get out of there. That happens. But generally speaking, this is the difference between like the great players and the players who are still learning. He's trying to figure out ways to abuse this. So I could say as a mage, when I get rot, I'm not going anywhere. Why? I have 2 blinks. So at 1 second, I literally blink to a wall, drop it, blink back, and I'm gone for like less than a second, and then continue to DPS. So as I was saying before, we can ask ourselves, if we look at timings like this with these rots, well, he got a rot towards the end of the fight. Was that during Metamorphosis? Because that would have been a huge difference, and maybe it would explain some of the lack of casts. The good thing about Warcraftlogs is you can actually add it to this bar up here. And what this will do is give you a bar at the top, or a couple of bars, where the times of events will actually go side by side. So the top one we have here is actually abilities, Metamorphosis. This was the duration of time that Ghosty was in Metamorphosis. And what we can see here is, it wasn't that, because he got his rot in the middle before his second meta, and the other rot didn't come till afterwards. So we can do the same here with So Good. As you can see here, we have nothing here. So we're going to go rot. That also happened at like towards the end of the fight. We'll add rot to it. Then we're going to go buffs. And we're going to look for Metamorphosis. Oh, there it is. Add it. And then we're going to look side by side. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. He got his rot immediately, sort of a few seconds after Metamorphosis finished. So both of them did get a pretty much full duration Metamorphosis where there wasn't much affecting them from what we can see with a very basic look. Okay. I think have I just noticed that Ghosty wasn't flashed. Interesting. Okay, there's so we can see damage buffs. Flask. Was he not flashed either? I don't think I brought this up because I didn't go into this much detail with him. Let's have a look. Oh, no, he was flashed. He was flashed. That's okay. But you can see all these things going on. Momentum's a big part of Demon Hunter DPS as well. So we can see Ghosty got momentum 58 times. And actually, So Good got it less, 57 times. These are all the kind of things that you're going to look into to figure out what actually happened throughout the course of the fight. All right. So I don't want to go too much further than that, but I hope this is something that you can easily use, how to add buffs and debuffs, and how to compare yourself to other players, and how to check things out. So what was the advice I gave to Ghosty? Right. So it's a very simple thing. I flicked through these logs very, very quickly because I've experience with it, but you guys should hopefully have a decent idea how to look at this. And it was pretty simple. It's really, it's like, think about trying to get crit in these slots where you don't have crit. Use potions, use a neck enchant, and then come back and we'll see what the logs compare to then. Once you've done those changes, we can get a more accurate side by side, because right now we can't really do that because we're looking at logs that don't have this. They don't have a neck enchant, they don't have potions, and plus your crit chance is way, way different. A couple of item swaps could maybe fix that, and maybe adding the potions in and adding the neck enchants like we saw over with So Good here is something that we can actually do to figure out what's going on. All right. So once again, the intention here is not to mock anybody or anything like that. It's just a way of showing you guys how to look at these things and actually gain useful information from them. I hope that helps you guys out. Thank you so much. I'll see you again. Bye-bye.